4 governments moved on conversational AI in a single week. Washington, Atlanta, Denver, and Brussels all advanced new regulations. They mandate the same architectural baseline. The systems must verify the age of the user, repeatedly disclose that they are machines, and trigger active protocols during a crisis. And yet, none of these governments included a single dollar of funding to build or enforce these requirements. We tend to read regulatory mandates as legal terms of service. In reality, they are strict engineering loads pushed directly into the codebase. A requirement like Georgia's recurring disclosure clock demands constant session tracking. It requires data storage, continuous integration pipelines, and active human review systems to monitor compliance. Drafting the legal architecture takes a pen. Writing the software to run it takes engineering hours, and the cost of those hours has been left entirely off the government ledgers. For tech founders and systems engineers, compliance is no longer a future legal abstraction. It is an immediate baseline operational expense. The U.S. Senate's GUARD Act and the incoming wave of state laws shift massive capital expenditure entirely onto private operators. Because software crosses borders, the European Union's aggressive regulatory timeline is already forcing the hand of American engineering teams. The financial burden of AI policy lands squarely on the servers. It is a direct, unfunded tax on software architecture. Baseline architecture connects a user directly to an LLM, but the GUARD Act forces a third-party identity API into the flow. Georgia adds interval timer loops for machine disclosure, and Colorado demands an escalation pathway for human clinical review. That specific clinical requirement is waiting on Governor Jared Polis's desk. His signature dictates whether that human-in-the-loop module becomes a strict legal reality in Colorado. Building these individual modules is a heavy capital expenditure. Running them continuously across millions of user sessions creates a massive, recurring operational expense. The human review node breaks the core economic model of software. Requiring a licensed human in the loop destroys the advantage of infinite scalability. An AI system designed to comply with these laws requires a heavier, vastly more expensive architecture than one designed purely to process language. The engineering mandate is strict. The mechanism to enforce it is even heavier, and we can map this by looking at the GUARD Act. The legislation sets penalties reaching $250,000 per violation. Every failure to verify age or disclose the AI's identity counts as a separate offense. To pursue these violations, the bill gives subpoena power to the U.S. Attorney General and deputizes 50 individual state attorneys general to bring their own actions. The text creates 51 distinct enforcement pathways. It appropriates 0 checks to fund the legal shops tasked with doing the work. The Unfunded Mandates Reform Act triggers when private sector costs cross $206 million. The Congressional Budget Office should score these costs, but no score for the GUARD Act exists. Missing that score avoids the procedural trigger entirely. The true financial weight lands on the operators writing the code, the verification vendors, the users handing over their IDs, and the state attorneys general operating without a budget. By advancing the bill without a score, the government mandates a universal safety architecture while keeping the true macroeconomic cost off the public record. These mandated compliance modules create secondary risks. The Electronic Frontier Foundation points out a severe privacy flaw in universal age verification. Verifying a child's age requires companies to gather government IDs. This builds massive identity databases, creating immediate, high-value targets for data breaches. Beyond data storage, the output of the model itself is under legal scrutiny. Nippon Life Insurance sued OpenAI in Chicago, alleging a user generated dozens of false legal filings using ChatGPT. OpenAI's defense relies on the product versus tool distinction. They argue the chatbot exercises 0 independent legal judgment, making it a tool used by a human, not an active participant. That defense sits in stark contrast to how states view major platforms. In New Mexico, the state is taking Meta to trial, demanding a $3.7 billion mental health abatement fund for platform design choices. The judge in that single state trial will set the ceiling for what courts will order against platform conduct moving forward. Building the mandated architecture costs money up front. It also exponentially multiplies the legal and security surface area the company must defend in court. Operators cannot easily silo their underlying architectures state by state. A fragmentation tax applies when local jurisdictions force different engineering standards onto the same global codebase. The lack of a unified, funded federal framework in the United States leaves a vacuum. Red states like Georgia are pushing forward with strict tech regulations and refusing to carve out exemptions for major platforms. The pressure is also international. The European Commission is currently implementing the AI Act, the broadest artificial intelligence law in the world. Article 50 of that act requires mandatory transparency. Anyone interacting with a conversational AI must be clearly told they are talking to a machine. This chart maps the conflicting timelines of global enforcement, showing the engineering crunch starting today. The European transparency requirement takes effect first. The timeline anchors at August 2026. Georgia's Senate Bill 540 and its 3-hour disclosure clock takes effect nearly a year later, in July 2027. The American federal landscape remains ambiguous. The U.S. GUARD Act and the pending Colorado bills hover without guaranteed enforcement dates. Multi-jurisdictional software deployment follows a golden rule. Developers must build to the strictest, earliest deadline. For any startup operating globally today, the European Union's August 2026 deadline effectively becomes the hard engineering floor. The debate over whether to require human oversight, age verification, and machine disclosure is over. 4 governments settled the shape of the required architecture in a single week. The legally compliant AI architecture is no longer a theoretical debate. It is an unfunded physical reality that tech operators must pay for and build today.